Good evening, viewers. Welcome to the Ghost Train, my podcast, storm chasing podcast. Everything about storm chasing gets talked about here, and we have a lot to talk about tonight. I know we haven't been on for like 10 days, but hey, you know what? It's late May. We're out chasing, so not everyone's going to be here to join us. So we do have a new guest, someone that you guys hopefully have heard of. Gene Moore will be joining us tonight. Gene, welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody.
Gene, you're from San Antonio, Texas area.
Right. I've been down
Okay.
here about 20 years,
And how long have you been chasing, Gene?
45 years.
So you're one of those just legends of storm chasing that have been around for before it was even considered a hobby. So you've probably seen it just evolve from, you know, just the whole science and technology aspect of it has really evolved, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Big difference.
Yeah. All right.
Easier.
Well, that's right. That's what Shane Adams says. It's a lot easier now. So that's actually kind of true. Well, Gene, we're glad you can make it on the show, and hopefully you enjoy your time here.
Okay, thanks.
Of course, my co-host James is actually here. You can actually see him this time, and
Yep.
his internet doesn't suck, which is like planets have aligned for this day to happen, apparently.
Yeah, no, it's been an amazing journey to get here, guys. I'm just happy to be here. No, I was kidding.
Oh, Ben Holcomb joins us again. What's up, Ben? How's it going, man?
Oh, it's going all right.
Yeah, just enjoying a Sunday not chasing for once.
Yeah, enjoying a few days of downtime here, and it's been nice to kind of catch up.
Exactly, I feel the same way, and I think another person who feels the same way is Skip, who
Hey,
has a black dot floating around his head.
yeah, that must be my draw thing or something.
Yeah, uh, yeah. If you guys didn't know, Skip has been driving with the Tibbs Doghouse, which is their support vehicle. And how long have you been on the road, Skip?
We just got back from a week out. I've been home a couple days now. That's not really bad though. The rest of the crew has been out for 3 or 4 weeks continuously, so they're getting really, really frayed, and everybody was really looking forward to going home for a few days. So yeah, we're all just kind of recouping and catching up with families and stuff.
Right. So are you guys going to go back out again this year?
Yeah. Yeah, we're out through June as long as there's something to chase. So,
Which, looking at some of the models, looks like there might be some chasing coming up, especially this week and possibly on the weekend, which we'll dive into that later. But first, we're going to discuss. This was actually a viewer question. Well, actually, before we actually start the show, I just want to remind everyone we do have the Q&A thing on the bottom of your stream. If you're watching live, you can hit that button, ask us a question on the air, and we'll try to do our best to answer them. But our first topic is is a viewer related question. They asked me, I think it was on Facebook. He asked me if we could talk about our process of forecasting and what we look at, what are some things we do look at, some things we kind of discount, and how the process goes. And everyone has their own individual style, individual forecasting method. So that's why I thought this was a great question for the guest, because you're going to hear a lot of different answers, I believe. And maybe some things you didn't know is what we actually look at, and some things that you thought was important may not be that important. So, and the viewer was Tommy Scanlon. He was yes, Nick Nolte, that button. He was the one that asked us that. So, all right. So yeah, let's start. Let's start with Gene, because Gene, chasing 45 years ago, forecasting was completely different than what it is today. So I guess with what I'd like to ask you is, how did you forecast in the early days, and how does that compare to how you forecast now?
Well, it didn't just change, it evolved very slowly over time. And all the forecasts initially, I'm going to say through much of the 70s, uh, was done in what we call the map room, the, the meteorology office at OU. And we put together our forecast, put a pencil on the map, made a dot, and drove to it. And that was basically it. we had, you can't carry a fax machine out in the field back then. The teletypes, and that's what we had, banging teletypes with all the alphanumeric characters, and we plotted our own surface maps. So everything was done old style back then, and our forecast was pretty much something that you lived and died by. Because once you went out in the field, you didn't have anything else. Some people would call back constantly, but they had to stop at a phone booth because there was not a cell phone. So there's old phone booths I pass by and look over and say, I remember 35 years ago, I stopped to call the lab, or I stopped to call OU and ask them about Amaryllis dew point or wind. It's kind of crazy. But I started out with a couple programs that I wrote, and I carried what was called a dumb terminal with me. It was a great big thing, and all it did was receive data. It didn't do any computations, and it was a TI 700, I believe. And we could get data on that and plot our own maps in the field and get radar. So that was a big step up toward where we are today. In other words, it was the beginning of what later became fax machines and what later became laptops. That was how it all started.
Wow. So, yeah, you live and die by the forecast. That's something we still talk about today, but obviously it's a lot easier today to do that. That Man, I don't know. There's only been a couple times where I've been confident enough in my forecast, like the morning of, that I can say I'm going to this town and that's it. I'm staying here. I'm not going anywhere else, and it actually works. I had that happen once this year, and that's it. That would be April 24th in Hays, Kansas. But yeah, back then, and especially I guess this time of year or late May, where the dew points are really high, and so you have a lot of haze on the horizon. You didn't have the luxury of radar to see a storm popping up, 100 miles away. You had to kind of hope that it was coming towards you, or you were in the direction of the where the flow was going to steer the storm. So compare that to what you do today. I mean, how do you forecast today, and what methods do you use now, and do you still use some of the older methods that you used to use?
Actually, I've gone back in time as far as field chasing goes, and I've kind of gotten off a few of the new methods, but I'm still as modern as everyone else. I have a laptop, I have all the data, but instead of trying to look at all of it, which I think is a mistake, I cherry pick the stuff that I think is most important on a particular day. In other words, I stopped this business of well, the RAP says, and the NAM says, and the GFS says, because you can kill yourself. So I pick a model, and I go with it, and I stay at that point. And I'm probably in the minority, because I know most people look at a lot of stuff. But I found I was choking myself trying to look at everything. Does that make any sense?
Well, yeah, because there's hardly ever a day where all the models will agree on one location. There's so much variability between all the models, and even the grids, are so spread out that, some of the higher res models pick up different things that other models don't. So I get that. You want to kind of just live off of one, and I'm guessing you probably go off the one that's been more consistent throughout the days and every run, as opposed to one that's kind of bouncing all over the place. But is that kind of how you do it?
I generally start out with a NAM and then go with the RAP, because it's the hourly updates. And that's just usually the way I do it. I get the quickest data, and that's just been the way I go at it now. And I haven't any problems like that. And I use the HRR too, but only if it initializes correctly.
Cheater!
Skip says you're cheating because you use the her.
I, I don't use it that much, but I do use it. I don't depend on it. I don't say, well, there's going to be a supercell at Abilene. Of course, the big one at Abilene was predicted by her, and it was
Hmm.
there, and we had already committed north, but it doesn't always work that great. But I use
Okay.
it, sure, why not?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the great thing about chasing is there is a lot of information available for everyone. It all depends on how you look at it and how you read it and how much you actually trust it. Um, so, but that's very interesting because I know a lot of people that look at every single model and try to find the area where all three of them or all four or five of them look like they're going to say this area. And yeah, throughout the day, they check up on it, every single run, and they just get flooded with information. And, I hear a lot about chasers that they do right before initiation, they're doing this, they're going up and down the highway because, oh, well, the north looks better, oh, the south looks better, and they just keep doing that. And you get stuck if you're stuck in the middle ground, then you might miss the entire show. So we do kind of echo that on the show. We say you need to commit to a target and try not to stick around the middle because you might get burned on either target.
Well, you can be right, you can be wrong, and you can be late. And late is almost always wrong because what's the best tornado? Usually the first one, the second one.
Yeah.
Everything after that usually gets degraded somewhat, unless it's a Bodie. You know, the usually, especially this year, the second, third, fourth tornadoes, they're almost always rain wrapped.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you really should be there when the first one comes down.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree that the second one is almost always the best tornado. It's always the prettiest. Sometimes it's the first, but usually it's the second, in my opinion.
Yep.
yeah, that's true. This year has been like that, where the first or second have been the most photogenic, and then usually the rest are getting grungy and whatnot. I mean that was a great example on the Elmer Day. That big tornado was the first tornado of that storm, and then after that, it got really messy, really high precip. Not to mention, it was in a bad road network of Oklahoma up in the Wichitas. So for me, when I was chasing that, I saw the first tornado, and then after that, I was good with calling it a day because you can tell it was just growing really messy. So very good pointers, Gene. I think hopefully a lot of people learn from that because you're right. You don't want to choke yourself out with too much data, and you might fake yourself out because you might see something that may not actually be there. So, all right, James, how about you? What do you use since you're kind of fresh to OU meteorology, and they're teaching you some things and whatnot. So, what do you use? No, they're not teaching you anything. You're muted, by the way.
The thing with OU is it's a great meteorology school. Undergrad's amazing. It a lot of the stuff that's taught, while it can be applied, to actual physical meteorology, at the same time, some of it's not too helpful. And the crash course in forecasting really doesn't come till later in the cycle of most of the classes you'll take. So most of the stuff, unfortunately, I kind of started out with a pattern recognition based forecasting method when I was younger because I didn't have the best knowledge base going into this. So a lot of what I do is kind of based on if it looks, depending on what part of the country it's in, what time of year it is. So a lot of climatology, and then third thing is going back over model data and then not unsmoothing it with actual observed data. I kind of have shied away from using most of the high-res stuff. I mean, the Herb on occasion, and then the 4 kilometer name are about the only two I've used with semi-frequency over the past couple of years. And then just honestly, just kind of a good hand-drawn surface chart. It's usually the first thing in the morning I do, and then hop on, look at one or two models, check satellite, check the mesonet, the two mesonets, West Texas and Oklahoma mesonet, if it's down there, or hop on the mesonet analysis page and just kind of flip through some stuff, and finally just checking any soundings that have been launched that day in the area or within, upstream or downstream of where it is to see what I'm going to be kind of looking at, maybe 6-10 hours in advance. So it's not a perfect method at all, and honestly this year it's kind of not been good because I don't think I've actually gone to my first target city once at any point this year. I've had to readjust almost every time, so it's still a work in progress.
Okay, so it's been kind of hit and miss with you this year, huh? Trying to work those methods.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe you might know or anything. It just seems like some of these, the NAM's been kind of off on something important, like maybe it shows too much instability or the moisture's a little too bullish, which I think the NAM's kind of had a history with the moisture issue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this year, what's really made it even more difficult is just all the rain that we've had. It's I think it's kind of tough for the models to pick up on all that because, all the standing water and the lush green fields out here in Texas, it's hard to kind of pick up some of that, evapotranspiration, and I think that might throw some people off. So very well. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's definitely been all this rainfall and how how much vegetation's come back over this previous couple months has really it's made it there's been little kind of details that have been off in each model, and each one has a bias to it. Rapid's too weak on moisture, NAM's too strong, whatever. But also, surface temps have been nowhere. We haven't hit, I don't think, 90s on most of the days that have been decent on most setups this year. It's been low 80s around average. It's a lot of the times I think this year models have been overshooting because they haven't been compensating for the immense amount of rainfall that from eastern New Mexico all the way through the southern plains, which is something that it would be hard. You'd have to calibrate that almost immediately after it starts happening. It would continue happening while you're trying to fix the model, so it's almost impossible to kind of change how it's working midway through the year. So it's just something to keep in mind because especially years like this. This has been kind of a wonky year. It's hard to take any solution, no matter how many times that model's been right before, with any solid conviction, I guess.
Right. Yeah. It's been kind of a tough year for the forecasters. That's for sure.
Yeah.
How about you, Ben? Let's hear your secret method of getting more tornadoes in Craig Mare.
Well, that was just easy. I have to leave the house, and I seem to be getting that. But no, a lot of what I like to look at is based on surface data, upper air. I spend a lot of the morning of a chase actually looking at soundings, visible satellite. I do like looking at mesoanalysis quite a bit. I have a hard time believing it sometimes, but I think it's overall a pretty accurate representation. And then really the model of my choice has always been the NAM. I'm not sure why that is, other than it seems to have given me some pretty good success over the years. I've always not, there's not been many days where I can say, well, that really screwed up. There are some days that the NAM is really screwed up, but it's not very often that I can say that.
Yeah, I use an AM too, usually, a couple days out, but yeah, I guess I'm kind of with you on that same boat about morning of, visible satellite goes up, mesoanalysis and surface obs are kind of what I look into. I don't look at soundings as much as I probably should, and especially I need to start looking at those, 12Z soundings, kind of finding where, different things are at, especially looking for mid-level lapse rates and whatnot. But I do that too. I do high-res models too, in terms of the 4-kilometer NAM, the HER, just kind of the convective allowing models. It's not my go-to. Sometimes I do also have trouble believing it, but there have been several times this year where I'll look at either one of those models, and as long as they're consistent with each run, putting a storm out in this area every single run, that's kind of where I start leaning to, and especially if the NAM and even in some cases, a few days out on the GFS, if those two kind of show that this area is at least in a good environment for storms, and then the high-res models say, yeah, there's going to be a storm popping here, if for several runs, then that's kind of what I start leaning towards.
I will say, I've really shied away from the HER and the 4 kilometer NAM and all the other convection allowing models. I'm really not a fan of them. Well, this year I've tried to look at the HER a little bit more, but typically it's after I've already made a forecast on what I expect. I have in my head what I expect the day to look like, and some days it's like, oh yeah, the HER says exactly what I'm thinking, and other days I don't know where the HER came from. So, and sometimes it's been right, sometimes it's been wrong, sometimes I've been right, sometimes I've been wrong. It happens, but I'm just not a big fan of, I guess you call them the cheater models, but I think it gives a lot of people a lot of confidence of things happening, and there's going to be some big events that happen that are really going to screw people because they're not going to see it coming because it wasn't on the convection allowing models. April 14th, 2012 is a day to look at. Not many of them handled that very well, if I remember correctly, and that was a day where you needed to be looking at observations.
Yeah, and you're right. Some of these models won't pick up on precip, but if you look at, if you're looking at the NAM, sometimes you look at it and it's like, okay, well, why isn't it breaking storms out here? Everything's there. You'll have, good dry line, good lift, impulses and stuff like that, but it's not breaking out storms. It makes you want to scratch your head, but sometimes you just got to play turn knobs and just hope for the best. And like Gene said, you got to live and die by your forecast sometimes. So, Skip, how about you? What's your method of forecasting?
Yeah, I don't have much to add, really. I think you guys really hit on all the main points there. Yeah, I'm looking for run-to-run consistency. That's the main thing that I like. I'm looking at the GFS, and if I see a consistent signal there for several runs, I'll start paying attention. Same with the NAM. If the models are flip-flopping, which really hasn't been an issue this season, I'll start digging into other models like the SREF and the Euro. Yeah, a couple of little secret weapons I use are the NAM's lid strength index, which has actually been pretty moot this season. We actually haven't had much of an EML to work with and a strong cap for a lot of these setups. It's been a wide open cap for the early part of the season. So yeah, I'm usually looking at the LSI for a hint at initiation and a indicator on whether I'm going to have elevated or surface-based storms. The other secret weapon I look at a lot is the 3 km CAPE plots. If you don't have any 3 km CAPE, you're probably not going to see a tornado. So I think those are a couple of underused forecast parameters. Day off, I'm really going for the VizSat loops with surface obs overlays on top of them and the meso-analysis graphics. That's probably what I'm using the most day of this setup. So any I peek at the HER and the 4 km too, and again what I'm looking for is consistency. So I want to see the HER. If the HER's plotting the same storm for 5 runs in a row, and if the 4 km is hinting at it too, then I'm going to start to believe it. But what I really like to see is a rather obvious surface pattern. That nice thermal access with the winds, with a little surface trough and the winds backing around the top of it. And you're going to play right off the nose of that. To me, that's just a real nice thing to see to make you feel real confident about your target. So that's what I got.
Yeah, that's actually very true. I mean, but that's kind of that area that you talk about. That's pretty indicative of warm front patterns, but also just any sort of surface. Got a good surface low with some backwinds on the northeast side of it. So, hey, real quick for you, also Skip. Question from Mike Tobin. He asked if, since you were working support for the TIV, if if they forecast their target with the group effort, or is it just one particular meteorologist?
So I'm in the doghouse, which is kind of the support vehicle. It's kind of like the um, ugly redheaded stepchild of the group. So they're like, sometimes Tiv goes after the main storm, and they're like, send Doghouse over to that storm to make sure we don't miss anything. Tiv has their own meteorologist, Justin Walker. So he's like a primary forecaster for the group. So he's making all of the immediate decisions for the Tiv, and we're pretty much 50-50 sometimes on where we're targeting for the day, but usually we just talk it over and come to a group consensus. So it's a group discussion. I mean, everybody's putting in input actually. So it's the whole crew that's really deciding where we're going.
Okay. Yeah, that'd probably be the best anyway, because you don't want one guy getting all the blame on that one if they miss a storm. You can at least spread the blame around. So, all right, cool. Well, that's very interesting from everybody. Different opinions on how to forecast. Yeah, you're right, Skip. When you said lid strength, I do. If there is going to be questionable capping, that is one thing I look at. And does anyone else use 0 to 3 kilometer cape?
Yeah.
You do? Yeah. I mean, I was always told that when that looks good, then you probably have a good day. So.
One thing.
Yes, sir.
On the 0 3 kilometer cape, this year I don't think it's been as good as it usually is, because especially the bottom part of the column is so saturated that when you look at the forecast sounding, you'll notice the two lines, the moist adiabat comes up almost side by side for maybe the first 10 or 12,000 feet, a lot. And that tends to kill a lot of that initial cape, which is really good. I like it. That's your pop, that's your pop when the cap breaks. But I think this year, a lot of times, it hasn't been that good. I've seen a lot of storms go up that didn't have that pretty or explosive look to it. But once they got going, they spun up and did just great. And I think that this excessive amount of moisture this year has hurt that low-end cape. That's just an opinion.
Yeah, well, I've seen that. I've seen where some of these days that produce great tornadoes have, not that great looking 0 to 3 kilometer cape. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of those Southern Plains setups this year, down in Texas and Oklahoma, because absolutely, because it's so saturated down there, and you wind up dealing with there's no cap, and you got kind of these watery updrafts where the lapse rates are kind of lagging a bit. And yeah, you kind of wind up with this mushy storm mode initially, but then the shear kind of takes over eventually, and the updraft gets going, and it finally organizes itself. Yeah, absolutely. Those two plots really have not been ideal this season, just because of this weird no cap and so much rain type situation we're dealing with.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting year. I was gonna ask this, I guess, on Storm Track, but maybe I'll throw it to you guys. With as much rain as we've seen, is it pretty much feasible to count, Texas and Central Texas through Central Oklahoma as almost an extension of the Gulf of Mexico, because, you just have so much water just out there. I mean, you got to think that that's just going to really help rapidly transport moisture, up that corridor before it actually kind of comes over, and especially the high plains and further north in the northern plains, which I think a lot of people are hoping happens this week. So, I mean, is that pretty much feasible to say? James, Gene, any input on that?
No, I don't think it's extension of the Gulf of Mexico. Obviously, I mean that's our moisture source. It's hard to say that a plot of land has taken over a body of water. And even right now, I mean, I'm looking, right now at DFW the dew point's 59, but if you look out in the Gulf, it's 70 easily, just about anywhere. Um, I mean, yeah, it's going to help with moisture, and we've had quite the what would you call it, the tropical air mass in place most of the spring. But we haven't really had much to scour it out. But you're still need to go to the Gulf basically for the moisture.
Just kind of piggybacking off that, I definitely agree. It's not replaced. I don't think it's been going to be a main source of moisture just because of all the groundwater that's standing out there. But our moisture content has been so high over the past probably month and a half that even with this last scouring, the lowest dew point I'm seeing on the Mesonet right now is 54 up in Freedom, Oklahoma, which is up in Woods County. I mean, that's pretty dang good after 2 MCSs roll through in a kind of moderate to weak cold front this time of year. I mean, I'll take that. So
Yeah, it just means rapid recovery. Once you start getting some good southeasterly winds or southerly winds to push all that moisture up.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see as opposed to years past is that especially like last year, it seemed like any good day the moisture would mix out, and I don't think we'll be seeing nearly as much of that this year, and even into probably next year.
Yeah, and that's kind of one thing I really was putting in the back of my head was all this rain now. How is that gonna carry over to next year? I mean, and especially if they're forecasting a pretty strong El Nino at least through fall. That's just gonna keep dumping some rains down here. We're gonna get several rainy patterns, and I saw the Climate Prediction Center's outlook for the next month, and Southern Plains was once again above average on precip amounts. So, I mean, I would imagine that's going to have some effect in the next year. Maybe next year it won't be such a HP messy show because hopefully we have the moisture in place for good setups, but not so much to where precipitable water values are through the roof because of how much moisture is just sitting out here. So we can only hope. I mean, maybe that'll happen.
Yeah.
Go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, at the very least, it's going to make for much nicer drives instead of going through a barren wasteland of dead prairie grass.
Yeah, it's weird. I chased New Mexico. What was that? Sunday, I guess. No, Sunday. Today's Sunday. Saturday. Yesterday. No, not yesterday. It was Friday. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I was chasing New Mexico Friday, and it was green out in New Mexico, and it was really weird because you chase out there, around Tucumcari, and it always looks like you're out in the middle of the desert because it's just dead grass and, just cactus and all that crap out there. But yeah, this year I went out there and it was green. It was actually green out there, which is quite a surprise. So
Tyler Hudson has a question too about he asked, are the dew points the main reason that 2015 has been such an HP fest, or is there something else in the upper level winds causing it? And I mean, obviously dew points and moisture being in the air has helped, but it seems like we've had that somewhat of a persistent subtropical jet over the southern plains that has been, I assume, basically because of El Nino, has been keeping things pretty active down here. But it also seems that most of our storms, our storm motions, have been pretty much with the upper jet. Nothing deviant, and it causes the updraft to rain into the the downdraft to rain into the updraft. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired after all this chasing, but I would say the upper level winds are causing it more than the just the dew points, but the dew points have been nice, obviously.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's definitely kind of three main things. You have convection, almost every single day this year with tornadoes, and everything's been getting shunted south probably by a solid, 150, 200 miles from where it was originally going to be. Putting it in deeper moisture, putting it further away from the better upper level support and the better shear. And also, you're closer to your moisture source, higher dew points, more precipitable water, yada, yada, yada. And just the way storms have been, they've been moving with the mean flow aloft, but they haven't been it seems like most storms have been, always surrounded by maybe another 3 or 4 other storms because of our source region for the EML getting rained on repeatedly all throughout the year, and for weaker capping, which causes that stuff to shoot up in the northern half of the target area, and then the southern half ends up being kind of a messy multicellular crapshoot out of the gates for a lot of these days at least.
Yeah, definitely the early convection shoves everything in the south, but at the same time, that is laying out tons of outflow boundaries. Well, at least usually 1 or 2 big outflow boundaries throughout the day that some of those storms can latch on to later in the day, which I think some of these storms that, it looked like you wouldn't believe that it actually dropped a tornado. It's because, it latched onto a boundary. Oklahoma's already had 2 big days where it looked like a lot of junk was in the area, but she also had a warm front sitting out there, that was kind of getting suppressed to the south from river convection. And once those storms kind of rolled up on that warm front, they would produce tornadoes.
I mean, as I say, even the Elmer storm looked like absolute garbage maybe about 20 minutes before it actually produced. Like, it's been a weird year.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of weird years, I would like to ask Gene, since he's been chasing for quite a while, have you seen a pattern like this before where it just seemed like it was just a huge deluge in the south, and especially after a big drought? And what does that usually, or what did that, I guess, what did that do to the following year on the years that happened, in your opinion?
Well, just with respect to tornadoes, this year reminds me the most of 1977. And one of the big keys on that was that in the Texas Panhandle, there were snakes all over the road. The reason why was there was so much rain that they had nowhere to go. Now, within the last week, I've seen some Facebook articles and pictures from chasers. Look at all these stinking snakes. They don't have anywhere to go. I think it was an unofficial total, but at the end of May 1977, Shamrock had 30 inches of rain. Shamrock,
Wow.
Texas. Does that sound familiar? I mean, to me, there were a lot of similarities between 77 and this year. But then you're going to ask me how June turned out, and I don't remember a whole lot. So that's kind of the pattern we've got. Also, back then, chasers came out and did their chase away from work, if you will, the people that didn't live in Oklahoma or Kansas. They came out usually the last 2 weeks of May. And in 77, they got burned, especially the last week of May. And this year, the last week of May, has not been that great. There was a beautiful isolated event in New Mexico, but the last week of May, didn't it really kind of tail off from everything else?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The only 2 events that come to mind, obviously, is that beautiful tornado near Dora, New Mexico on Friday, and then of course the Canadian supercell, Canadian Texas, on the 27th. But that too was an isolated event. But I believe that day there was stuff up in Kansas that I believe Skip saw. But yeah, there's been, the month of May, the first 3 weeks of May have been, big in terms of several multi-tornado days, a couple of mini outbreaks, especially on these little 5% tornado risk days that the SPC issues that have kind of caught some people by surprise. And but yeah, this last actual week of May, just I mean, there's a reason why we're all sitting at home on May 31st right here. Is because we got nothing to chase and nothing really in the horizon to chase, at least not in the immediate future. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's been kind of it's tailed off from the pace that it was going.
So to me, it's a lot like 77. And I don't even think it's that great. And what I'm looking at on the map is not that great. But then again, in that time period, stream off to North Dakota, like we do, or Montana. So if that stuff occurred, we didn't get it.
If you're saying that this year is very similar to '77, I guess everyone at home wants to know what happened in 1978. Was that a classic year, or was that a dry year? How did that go?
I don't have numbers in front of me, but what I remember, I always thought of 78 as a year that wasn't that good. But I went back and looked at my photographs, and I got a lot of tornadoes. I have a lot of color slides. That's what we had back then. But tornadoes from 1978. The hot spot was east of I-35 in north central Oklahoma.
Oh, great.
That was where Red Rock, around in there, there were a lot of storms on subtle stationary fronts, things like that, back then. And Kansas and North Texas there wasn't a big, I don't remember it as being a spectacular Oklahoma year, but I remember there were tornadoes, good tornadoes within driving distance.
Okay.
So
And
it wasn't a bad year.
and yeah,
No big I can't remember if there were any big outbreaks. I don't think there were.
I was just going to ask, and I'm assuming you were did you live in Norman at the time? Is that what you mean by driving distance?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So southern Nebraska was a big chase back then.
Okay.
I mean, we had been, quote, going out as an OU group, starting for the most part in 72 in Oklahoma, and 73 I skipped the calculus class in the afternoon to go chase the Texas Panhandle and got 2 or 3 tornadoes. So that was when we were first going out away from Oklahoma. So 77 wasn't that far from that time. In other words, we still weren't far away.
A little dodgy there, but okay. So that means, so Ben, I guess that means that you and Craig can do your bet next year since it's all going to be close to home.
Well, I'm looking here, and Piedmont, Oklahoma had a tornado on April 30th, 1978, and there's actually some video on YouTube, believe it or not, some NSSL.
That was a good one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it looks like it was a nice one. Came out of an LP. It looks like. So.
So we had tornadoes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it looks like there was definitely tornadoes. Things to chase in 1978, and well, it sounds like it really just wasn't a great year, but it was an average year, a good year where you can, make some good forecasting and get some tornadoes, and I would just be happy for a year like that, especially after the last three. The last three have been pretty bad: 2012, 13, and 14.
Had you ever heard of the seven days in May? Old term.
No, I haven't.
Well, okay. 7 days in May occurred in 77, and there were 7 straight days in the Texas Panhandle and the Oklahoma Panhandle of tornadoes, nonstop. So anybody that went through that was jaded by 78.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
I got to add that in because it was absolutely perfect for chasers.
Yeah, that's I mean, I guess we really went through quite a number of chase days. Not every day was nice tornadoes or whatever, but we went through quite a few chase days here of something that we haven't done, and I haven't done since 2011, really, since this drought really started getting underway, 2010 even.
Yeah. So this year kind of reminds me of like 2010 on steroids, so with less pretty tornadoes.
It depends on how you chase those tornadoes, sir. There was plenty of pretty ones this year so far, and it just depends on which ones you got on. So
yeah.
No, but that is true. A lot of tornadoes this year have been really soggy, very high precip. One of those. I think for me, it's bad when you have to crank the contrast on, a picture or even video to see it. I mean, cool, we saw the tornado, but man, it just wasn't that photogenic. But yeah, and I know Ben's chasing style is pretty aggressive, kind of like mine. You have to kind of, this year's you have to be pretty aggressive to get in a position to get, the good angle of some of these tornadoes this year. So, but that's really cool. I'm glad to at least hear that the following year, after a big rainy season, turned out to at least be an average year, because I think that's a lot better than, like Ben said, a lot better than 12, 13, and 14. Well, especially 13 and 14. I think those 2 years were really bad for chasers, unless you just like, well, both of those years. There's 3 days on each of those years where you could have had the best chase year of your life, but if you didn't hit those 3 days perfectly, it was a pretty tough year to work with. So, Tyler Hudson just said, I guess he went to SPC, but it says there were 789 tornado reports in 78, which, dealing with inflation, because there wasn't many people to see tornadoes that year, that sounds like quite a bit. Not everyone was out chasing like there is now, so that's probably a good number. Sounds like about an average year in today's standards.
Yeah, it looks like 16 May 1977 was probably the best day out of all those. It looks like there were some really good tornadoes that day.
7 good tornadoes.
Yeah.
And did you see them all, Gene?
Yeah, one right after another.
Oh, yeah.
Almost lost my mind.
Yeah, especially Mayfield, Oklahoma looked like it was really good. Shamrock, Texas. Wow, just some really good tornadoes that day.
Yeah.
Wow, they're listening. Yeah, so I just saw F4 in the Oklahoma Panhandle. How often does that happen, right?
Oh man, and no joke. Well, cool. So that's kind of what you guys can look forward to next year. Maybe we believe we all kind of agree, and I think we're not. There's no way we're just gonna suddenly become in this horribly rancid drought again. It's gonna take a couple of years to get to that point of like 2014. And looking at the drought monitors, Texas is out of the D2 drought for the first time, and I think since 2010, which is incredible. I think that's going to really help next year out. I think we should have a pretty, like Gene said, probably an average season at least. And if that's the case, I think that's plenty of opportunities to get your career day out there. So, all right. Well, speaking of, let's keep in the chasing topic here. Our last show we had was on May 21st was our last show. We've all done some chasing since then, so it would be interesting to hear some of you guys on your accounts and some of these last chases we've had. Skip, we've kind of kept you quiet here lately. So since the 21st, how have you guys done? Because you were chasing with, were you chasing with Tiff at the time or not yet?
21st of May, yeah. Like these days are all blending together in my head, and I haven't put them down on paper yet, so I have no idea. What was the 21st again? You'll have to remind me. Like if I get started, I could probably tell you what we did and where we went afterwards.
Well, I know
Thursday.
I know the 22nd. The only real tornado of the day was down by Fort Stockton. The 23rd was the wedges on those stupid troll rain showers in Oklahoma City. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll have no idea where that was. I think Friday we were up in Colorado. That was kind of a crappy day. Saturday was kind of a fun day down near Lamar, Colorado for us. We got a couple of brief tornadoes down there. Storm was pretty HP, but we got in there pretty close, and the structure was dramatic. What else?
Sunday was Plains EF0 wedge.
Yeah, Sunday night was the plane stuff.
Lamar,
Colorado again.
So yeah, that was a good chase for us. Actually, that was the day I was thinking about where we were in Lamar because we chased the Lamar area first, and then Tiv actually went home because they can't shoot in the dark, right? So I mean, their primary goal is to make an IMAX movie. So those night tornadoes are kind of worthless to them. So they went home, and we decided to stay out in Doghouse and chase. And we came in from the north, and the middle cell actually on the way down as we were passing it had this sculpted supercell updraft base. It was gorgeous, and it was like lined in crimson in the last of the twilight. Really pretty, and a little funnel underneath. So we stopped and watched that for a few minutes, and then it kind of gusted out because it was getting interfered with by all the other cells. I think we missed a brief tornado that Chad Cowan reported as we were still getting down there. And then we came in after dark on that storm. And the lightning actually wasn't that great. Like, we're getting flashes under the base, but they weren't super bright, and there weren't enough of them. And we had visual on structure under the base. Brinley spotted a cone tornado. We weren't 100% certain at the time when we spotted it, though. And then we decided to jet east of Plains. And then the damnedest thing happened. Like, we drove into like solid thick fog, and we were just completely enveloped in this inflow fog, which was really scary actually. So because we had no visual and it was completely dark, and I could tell just based on the inflow wrapping up that there was a large tornado forming. So we actually kind of took our escape route at that point and drove away from the storm, which killed me too because that's when it was really wrapping up in that wedge state. And in hindsight, it turns out that that tornado really wasn't as big as I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be this massively long track, violent wedge. What I think happened was the tornado looked a lot larger than it probably was because it was ingesting all of that fog. So it was blowing itself up like this puffer fish, sucking up all that fog. So I remember the damage survey. It was quite a bit smaller than the chasers were purporting it to be. I was disappointed we missed that stage, but we did manage to squeak a shot out of it on the camcorder, so that wasn't a bad chase for us. Kind of our highlight of the trip was May 26th down in Texas. That was a really unusual storm. It started out classic, but the storm kept propagating to the southeast. I think because we had the northwest shear vector on that. But what happened was you'd have your wall cloud and mesocyclone, and then the new one would form southeast of there, which is a little bit unusual. And normally you're expecting it to form northeast of the storm. So, and then the storm went HP, and I thought we were going to be kind of done because it was just a really nasty, gnarly HP. But the storm kept going. It kept cycling, and the new meso would form on the southeast corner of the RFD gust front. I don't think I've ever really seen that before. So or chased a storm quite like that. So we were actually in the core for a lot of that chase, hopping down as the storm cycled, and I think we were on it for at least a half dozen of those southeast propagating cycles. We came in behind one of the couplets, and as we came out of the green core of this storm, we had visual on these dark black fingers in front of us. And I'm looking at these fingers, and I'm like, that's a gust front. It's just RFD gust front. We're fine. We kept going towards them, heading east, and we stopped underneath the gust front. And I could see kind of a tail cloud off to the left. An old radar scan had a couplet off to our left. We weren't sure where it was now. It wasn't really present on the radar. It looked kind of disorganized. And I got out of the doghouse to kind of feel the winds and get my bearings because I wanted to make sure we weren't doing something stupid in our positioning because we were underneath the storm. And I'm looking at this gust front. I've got outflow on my back. So I'm like, okay, it's outflow. There's the gust front. We're fine. And then Brinley starts shouting, tornado, 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 and off to our left. And I see what looks like a gust-nado. It's this little tiny vortex, and it's spinning along next to us to the left. And the thing that was really bizarre and confusing to me was that it was moving very, very fast to the west. And you kind of expect a gust-nado to be heading east with the storm's gust front, right? And it was about that time that I also noticed the fingers above us were rapidly drawing in scud. It was an inflow-based feature. So I hadn't put it together yet, but we were sitting underneath a rapidly organizing wall cloud. And just being underneath it, I couldn't get my bearings properly. And then all of a sudden, we had all of this spray being kicked up to the left. We were kind of parked next to a lake. So we jumped in the doghouse. Tib was right in front of us, and then the winds hit. Really intense winds, shifting directions. Out of the north is when they were strongest. We had small debris flying through the air. And I was still really confused at this point. The doghouse was rocking. We were putting on our helmets and goggles because it was getting so intense. And finally, I am starting to look around, like, where is all this wind coming from? This doesn't make sense to me. I'm getting the rising from side to side. I'm not seeing any structure that I can recognize. And then finally, I look like just straight up like this. And there's just this gigantic bull basically right over us, just hanging right over our heads, and it's just turning away. And I was speechless for a second after I saw that. It was just one of the most crazy, scary things I've ever seen while chasing. And at that point, I put two and two together that we were basically hit by a weak tornado. It was EF0 winds, but just being under that huge bull funnel cloud was really, really impressive and I don't know, scary. So that was kind of our most impressive intercept. We got a few days after that, we got brief tornadoes on several other storms. The Canadian day, that was a huge, huge regret for me. We looked at the targets long and hard on that day. I remember the Helicity tracks plotting along the panhandle, and I called it out loud during the morning forecast. I'm like, Canadian. Kansas looked good too. We looked at both of the targets long and hard, and we were torn on which one to go to. And we decided on Kansas. And again, the primary reason we did was TIB is trying to put some stick pods in tornadoes, and they're trying to film putting those pods in the tornadoes. So in order to do that, they have to get in front of the tornado, and they have to get a good shot of it. And looking at Canadian, I'm like, okay, it's the Cap Rock Canyon terrain. It's the Canadian River Valley. We've got 4,000 cape, and we've got 25, 30, 35 knots of shear. It was kind of borderline. So I'm expecting kind of shitty roads, and I'm expecting an HP storm mode. So we blew off Canadian, and we actually drove right through Canadian on the way up to our Kansas target. So it was just that one really stung. We got a gorgeous little funnel cloud way up just south of I-70, and it's really telling how we're doing our chasing this year because beautiful meso, gorgeous funnel cloud, and as it's forming, the TIB crew was like, this tornado is worthless to us because we were looking north and we had no north options, so we couldn't get in front of that tornado, and they shot it, but I mean it was basically dead to them, and then we just bounced around from storm to storm trying to get on something at that point, and I thought we were going to get a consolation tornado at the end. We were down by sublet, just this huge ground scraping tornado cyclone wall cloud. It was really wrapping up. I mean, it was churning. Last time I had seen something like that was April 14, 2012, the big high-risk event. And this thing was just starting to kick up multiple vortices on the back end of the rim there, and then it barfed outflow and was done. So, and then we got a couple of brief tornadoes on Thursday in Kansas. So, and then we called it and headed for home. So people had been out for weeks at that point, and they were getting pretty done. So yeah, actually in the last week or so, I think I don't know how many tornadoes we counted. It's going to be somewhere around 6 or 8, but they were almost all brief bird fart type tornadoes. So, but the one that went overhead, just because we were so dramatically close, that was probably one of the most exhilarating moments of my chase career. So, sorry for rambling forever.
It's all right, Skip. That's a pretty active week for you guys. Gene, did you chase at all this last week?
I did some. You probably can't see me now, right?
Right. I was going to say we're pitch black now.
Yeah, the candle went out. The laptop I'm using my laptop, and it's mounted in the chase vehicle. I just got a new chase vehicle. I'm putting it together,
Okay.
and it got dark. You
Yeah.
can't see me anymore because the sun went away.
Right.
So I'll skip this one this time because I'm dark.
Okay. Uh, Ben, I think you've had quite a bit of luck this last week and a half. So how about what have you got for us?
Yeah, I guess since the last show, the day after we drove all the way out to Fort Stockton, Texas, way out in almost to Big Bend National Park, um, saw what was reported as a tornado from, I don't know, probably we were 25 miles away. Have what we think is a picture of said tornado. Um, it's actually a report as a tornado, and there was a picture of it, and it looks like it's on the ground or close to it. It was a nice funnel. Um, so
At least I saw that a lot of people and a lot of people were wondering how the heck that happened or where it came from, but there was a lot of confusion on why that tornado even formed, and because it looked outflow dominant or something like that.
no, the storm didn't really look outflow dominant. Just the upper shear was. I mean, it really wasn't bad. It wasn't great, but um, I'm not really sure. I mean, it had a persistent wall cloud for quite a while, and um, whether or not it actually produced or not, I don't know. I'm probably not going to count it, but it was a nice storm, and was a little bit disappointed that night. Was hoping that there'd be some at least nighttime convection that I could chase, after getting to the hotel, and didn't end up happening. The next day, which was Saturday, I made a pretty decent target, I thought, of the dry line there up in Texas, between Lubbock and Amarillo. I had gotten some sort of food poisoning, so I was feeling like hell all day. And then tornadoes started going up in central Oklahoma, and nothing was going up. I think the dry line really wasn't convergent at all. The surface winds were east, or east of the dry line were south, rather. And so not really much convergence along the dry line, and storms really seemed to struggle. So I went back to Oklahoma. Didn't make it in time for any of that stuff, obviously. So Sunday, I picked up a photographer friend. She came out with me in 2012 and chased. Did not have much success because 2012 sucked. Decided to do it again. I even made a joke on the Saturday, before that, we might have to get diverted somewhere like Little Rock and bring her in by boat because it had not stopped raining in Oklahoma City. And she even asked, well, does it even worth it for me to come out there? And I said, yeah, come on out. We'll try and squeeze something out of this week. And so Sunday, wasn't very confident, but targeted Guyman, picked her up from the airport in the morning. Me, Ari, and her headed up there. Made it up to southeast Colorado. Missed most of the Lamar stuff, but decided the storms going up near Liberal looked pretty good. We wanted to get into some hail. They reported almost baseballs in Liberal, so we went there to basically, I forget what the name of the town was, just southeast of Plains, but say that again.
Kismet.
Yeah, the Kismet. That's where it was. So we ended up there, and then I ended up chasing. That storm produced. Though the first wedge was pretty big, and I agree with Skip that the LCLs were pretty darn low. The moisture content was pretty high, and it seemed to be the only place that wasn't shrouded in fog was the inflow to those storms. So I stayed in the inflow most of the time, and that's obviously kind of scary. And I ended up being a little bit closer to the first tornado than I would have really rather have been. It wasn't until looking through my video that I figured out that I was, that close. But we ended up seeing 3 different wedges and one elephant trunk. It may have been the rope out of the second wedge, though. It's hard to tell. You kind of lose, in the fog and in the dark. It's easy to lose all that stuff. So that was a really good day. And then the next day, I tried chasing in Texas. It was linear bullcrap, got cut off by flooding. I think Skip did too. Down there in Medill, Oklahoma. Closed roads, lots of flooding. Gave up, pretty early actually. And then the 26th was a fantastic day. I had targeted down basically around Newcastle, Texas, maybe even as far south as Breckenridge. And that one storm went up, and I didn't even look at any of the other storms, but they apparently all struggled compared to that one. Managed to get into a really good tornado there just north of Gordon. Had a nice stovepipe vortice in the field next to us. Turned into a pretty big cone. Maybe have seen as many as 4 tornadoes that day. I don't know. I still need to go back and look at footage and kind of decide. I haven't even looked to see what the damage surveys were. But then I was targeting Guyman basically again for the 27th. So we stayed in Childress that night. Woke up, and it's probably one of my best forecasts. We ended up going to Perryton, Texas. Got there just in time to have lunch, leisurely lunch, and then my friend Yari time-lapsed the storm going up from Turkey Towers to Anvil. And then we got underneath that storm and saw it, from basically Turkey Tower to producing tornadoes to, till pretty much dying out right at sunset. So I know it continued on, and I think they even produced tornado warnings. But I lost a back windshield from my I slammed my trunk, and it had smashed the window, and so I gave up. But overall, what the heck of a week. I don't know. It's had a really good time chasing this past week.
Yeah, man, sounds fun. Yeah, I remember met up with you there in Shamrock and all those guys, and I was like, at first I didn't know it was you because I saw your car without the back windshield. I'm like, look at this moron, he lost his back windshield today, and I didn't even think about that it was you.
Yeah, it was basically I had asked Yari, my friend from Finland, to pop the trunk on Sunday night when we were up in Kansas, and we were in the inflow to the tornado, and I had forgotten to get out and close it. We drove a little bit, and we're even more in the inflow or even RFD. I can't remember which, and the trunk blows open, and it bent up the trunk a little bit, and snout opens weird, and it was hard to get it to slam and all that, and just the week of pulling stuff out and putting stuff in the trunk managed to bend things up a little bit, and I went and slammed it on Thursday, Wednesday night, whatever night that was, and yep, it just shattered. So at least most of it shattered outside of the car. So that was nice.
Yeah, that's crazy. James, did you get out and chase at all this week?
I technically chased the 23rd, that little derpy warm front NATO day up in central Oklahoma. Of course, by the time I had actually convinced somebody to, get out of Norman and go down and check out that storm coming up by Purcell, it's too late. So that's basically all I've done the past I guess week and some change. So yeah, not too exciting. Still kicking myself over not finding a ride for the Canadian Day.
Yeah, that was the highlight of the week for me. I guess for me, Sunday the 24th, it was funny because I kept thinking to myself, I'm going to leave the Panhandle, and something's going to happen. But my target was Springfield. Actually, it was I was gonna sit up in Campo, but I wanted to know where Skip was at because I wanted to go meet him. So he said they were gonna be in Springfield, so I jumped up there to meet those guys and talked to them for about 20, 30 minutes. And by the time we got there, we already had a bunch of storms around near Lamar and out by Springfield, and nothing was really. I mean, everything was severe warning. Nothing was really there. And I remember we're driving north out of Springfield between there and Lamar, and I pulled off at the wind farm out there, and that's where we saw the storm of the day. Well, at that time, it looked good. Then it merged, and it looked like crap. And I thought we were done. And then there was a storm coming from the south. Looked really good, but then that's whenever I noticed that our storm here was actually it was starting to recover from that merge. It started getting really strong. And I think Skip will tell you that storm went from looking like crap to just huge vaulted supercell rotating wall cloud. I mean, it was a massive storm, like just in a heartbeat almost. And we saw that Scuddy thing on the inflow, and a lot of people say it wasn't a tornado, but I don't know, man. Skip, I mean, did you guys count that as a tornado?
So here's what I think kind of happened there, and I've seen this several times. Sometimes you get these lowerings under the storm, and they're rotating slightly, but not at tornadic speed. It's more like a wall cloud rotation. And then what happens is underneath that feature, you're getting these little wispy whiptail spin-ups. And I think that's what people are seeing under that. So we actually, after that, we actually got in there really, really tight. We got right in the core. We were getting tennis balls on our hail guards. And we had that big white lowering right in front of us. And it wasn't burning like a tornado, but if you looked at the edges, you could see it rapidly rising up and twisting. So there was motion. There was quite a bit of motion on that feature. I think you just had to get in there really tight to see it. So yeah, we counted it. To me, it was just another bird fart, though.
Is this? I'll screen share with you guys what I saw. Is that thing right there what you're talking about? Now, now see, this was
Yeah.
this, south of Lamar, and it basically developed out here, and there was some really strong inflow right here. And of course, this is the wall cloud. You can see the RFD cut right there in the center. And for me, it was kind of hard to distinguish whether it was rotating or not. And actually, I have video of it. And it did look like it was slowly rotating, and that's what I thought. It looked like there was some pretty fast vertical motion on the right side. So I thought, oh, well, there's a tornado. And I even said in the video, that's a tornado right there. It rapidly developed, and then it went into the rain. And then later that day, there was a lot of people, specifically Brandon Sullivan, had it on Facebook saying that he was actually further to the west, so he was almost looking due south at this thing. And he said it, first off, it never touched, and second off, it wasn't rotating. And so I was like, wow, really? That I thought that kind of sucked, but I don't know. I didn't really have the best angle for it, even though it does look like I did. It was really hard to tell whether or not it was on the ground. But yeah, we played around with that stuff for a while. I think we went further. We went east out of Lamar, and then we went south towards Taylor and Charlie, that little line segment. That's where we saw this gorgeous, sculpted HP, outflowish supercell, like just a big, really gnarly shelf cloud. And it looked really, really mean and intimidating, so we watched that for a while. And then we just started going east. And as we were going east, the stuff by Liberal was going up. And I really didn't think much of it. I see that all the time where little storms kind of pop up further south. And but I don't know if maybe it interacted with some sort of boundary out there. I didn't see any boundaries on the on mesoanalysis or anything. But yeah, we went east. We got to Ulysses, and as soon as we got to Ulysses, the first tornado warning went up. So we started going south. I think we went south to Moscow, and then I think we kept going south, and maybe we went, yeah. Anyway, ended up near Liberal, and by the time we got to Liberal, we were out shooting lightning because I still wasn't thinking much of this. And the structure on that thing with the lightning was pretty spectacular. And it was still holding a tornado warning, and then about the time the tornado warning, or about the time the couplet looked really strong, that's when we bailed up towards it. And funny thing is, we're going up that highway, 2 planes, and there's a nice hook in that storm. It's pretty much showing that it's going to drop here on radar. And I decided the best plan of action was a hook slice and try to get out in the inflow because we weren't going to be able to see anything with RFD. Well, turns out we hook sliced, and we were probably within a quarter mile of that early circulation. Um, and it was funny because I stopped on the side of the highway and I was recording, and I could really hear this audible tornado roar. And I didn't know if it was tornado roar or hail roar, but it sounded like tornado roar because it was a variable sounding roar instead of just a solid roar. And I guess I panned my camera back behind my car, and there was that big stovepipe right next to the highway, right behind me. I didn't even know about it. So we kept going. We got east of Plains. By the time we got east of Plains, full blown wedge was in effect. Stopped out there. Funny enough, Jeff Petrowski pulls up right in front of me, and he's out there recording and stuff. And Jeff's being Jeff and pretty animated at the time, but with good reason. I mean, this thing looked like it was a mile wide wedge, sitting on the ground out there. So it was one of those deals where, sure enough, if anything gets hit by this thing, it's going to be wiped out. But low SELs, high moisture content, um, all that. Yeah, I agree. Probably contributed to the mile wide wedge. But yeah, we started going up towards Meade, ran into that fog, and I didn't want to go any further. I backed out of there. Real quick on though, the whole fog NATO thing, is what everyone said, isn't exactly. I mean, it's a rare occurrence, but has happened before. I don't know if Gene, I don't know if you remember May 7th, 1995. That was a day where Amarillo almost got taken out by a nighttime wedge in the rain or in the fog. I'm not sure if that rings any bells with you.
I I'm not sure. I remember a day back then where there was a big tornado west of Amarillo,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
I never could see it.
yeah. It was a tornado at about 11:30 at night. Um, Started out by Umbarger, I believe, which is southwest of Amarillo. Um, Full saturation, really thick fog. The only way the spotters knew there was a tornado was they could hear it, and they had pieces of debris falling on them. Um, but it just stopped. It just stopped right southwest of town. It was heading into town, but just at the southwest corner of town, it finally lifted. So I believe there's a radar grab from at that time, and it had like gate to gate shear of almost 200 knots. Southwest of Amarillo. So that would have been a very strong tornado that rolled through Amarillo, but they looked out. But I mean, it's happened before, so it's a scary deal. I was not about to try to chase in the fog because I didn't know if the fog was going to let up anywhere further east, and but apparently it did. I guess Ben, put yourself in that inflow notch, and you actually had an actual view of it a couple times. I think the only other person I saw there was other chasers there, but the only other person I saw that was in there was Hank Shima. I saw pictures from him, I believe. Um, but then that was the 24th, and then I don't think I got out for any other day except for the 27th. For me, that the target popped out really easy. Outflow boundary sitting out there um, the night before, and I think I was talking to you, Skip, about that day that there was that outflow boundary that was from early preset from Oklahoma. And I was getting a little worried that was going to ruin the day, and it turns out that preset never even happened. So day saved on that one. But yeah, the outflow boundaries were out there. There was an intersection, I believe, near Canadian of an outflow boundary, and like it was almost like a secondary dry line because you had upper 60s east of the dry line near Canadian, then back behind it you had upper 50s, and then the other dry line was further west of Amarillo. And so yeah, I left Amarillo at about 2:30. That storm was severe one at the time. I just went straight to that storm. Got there, sat in one spot for about 30 minutes, watched the whole thing. Went into town, went west of town, and actually it's funny because Jeff Duda posted video from that day. He sat in the exact same spot I did, but he was there before the tornado, and then he went up Highway 60. I was there after the big one, and we saw three tornadoes in that river valley out there, kind of back to back to back. And then after that, I did chase the day after. which was, or not the day after, maybe it was Sunday. No, no, it was Friday. I'm sorry, Friday. I don't know where I'm off on the days. Okay, the 29th I did chase. I was in eastern New Mexico. I even my target was wherever Telly and Charlie was going to be, and we went west on I-40 to Tucumcari, watched the storm, tried to go south, and then that big storm down that eventually produced the Dora, New Mexico tornado. I was north of it. I was trying to go south, and then the road curved back to the east to Dora, and then it would go south again. And I just, I was late. We were late. We were late by 10 minutes of that beautiful white stovepipe tornado. So I guess that happens every now and then. We can't all grab that, Campo-like tornado. So, all right. Well, it sounds like everyone's had a pretty decent week. Oh, well, Gene, did you chase at all? I guess now that we have you back, did you chase at all this last week, I guess?
This last week, I didn't chase much. I missed Canadian because I had an earache the night before, and it kept me up, and I just didn't feel like making the drive. My target was basically Shamrock to Canadian in that area along the border. So had I made the drive, I probably would have got it, but I can't say for sure. You know how that works out. And um, but I just felt really tired, and I just didn't feel like making that drive. I chased a couple of the days in Texas, but the flooding was so bad, it was just terrible. I can't. It's hard to describe the amount of loss of property and life down here, especially around the Austin area, where I saw just incredible devastation. And all the roads were closed. It was about 3 days ago, I think, um, and there were quite a few tornadoes out on the leading edge of a broken squall line, and I couldn't keep up with it. So I took the Highway 130, which is the fairly new pay toll from Austin down to I-10. That's the 80, 85 mile per hour highway. And that was the only thing above the water. It was that bad. As I
Wow.
looked down, driving, as I looked down on all the other highways, they were either covered in water or they were roadblocked or there were red lights all the way down. And I basically drove through about 3.5 hours of high wind and green core. I was so glad to get out of that thing. I mean, it was just trying to eat me the whole time. So that, and while I went north, there were 3 tornadoes in my county, one near the house. So it was impossible. This, like somebody said before, this place is turning into the Gulf of Mexico. So I was just glad to get home.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'm
been
also
bad.
I'm anxious to get north where it's drier.
You're gonna head to the Dakotas this week?
Probably within a few days I'll go north, but
Okay.
I don't think I'll make tomorrow's show.
Yeah, I think Tuesday is the big day in South Dakota, North Dakota border, and maybe even Nebraska. So yeah, I guess I don't know if Ben. I don't. Did you say you were gonna head out this week, Ben? If it looked good.
Probably not. I guess if we get a day that looks really good, I'm not gonna miss it. But um, I'm gonna be pretty picky about my chase days from here on out.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on because this day has been kind of a famous day. I know. I'm sure if you're a chaser and you haven't been living under a rock for the last few years, you know why this day is a pretty big day for the chasing community. And of course, it's because we lost three fine gentlemen 2 years ago in El Reno. Um, a lot of people visiting the memorial today, and a lot of people yesterday were actually out cleaning up the memorial, which is really cool. Um, There's a lot of chasers right now out there because I believe Rocky Raskovich was having his chaser picnic, which I thought about attending, but I was just kind of tired and exhausted and hadn't had a weekend at home, so it felt kind of good to stay at home for once. Um, but anyway, what we want to do now is a couple things. First off, James is going to kind of walk us through the setup analysis, so to speak. I know we haven't done those in forever, but we're going to kind of run the setup analysis on May 31st, 2013. Although I think the setup itself was a pretty simple target. Unless you wanted to play secondary targets, then you kind of had to pick and choose. But the primary target was pretty much a bullseye on that day, and James will run us through why that is.
Yeah, so just kind of start off here. I mean, most people that day, chased that day knew. I mean, just West Oklahoma City was going to be, probably the main show. I mean, it's probably one of the largest chaser convergences I've ever seen, or like one of the most, like, you saw it coming for days where everyone was going to end up. I mean, there was technically a secondary target across northeast Oklahoma and south Kansas, and then some people actually managed to catch tornadoes back further east into Illinois, but the of course the big kahuna was just around there near El Reno and just south of the Yukon. So kind of just jumping right in, I'll share my screen real quick, head over to the SBC event archive. So obviously here are all the tornado reports, just kind of extending along. There was a quasi-stationary front that extended all the way back to the surface low in Oklahoma, all the way up through Indiana. And this day started out, from what I remember, it was a moderate, just kind of up the 44 corridor and down through to southwest Oklahoma to around Lawton, 15% hatch tornado probs. Obviously going to be something big, occurring on this day. And then if you hop over to the soundings, I mean, that's about as classic as you get. You know there's going to be a significant tornado with this. I mean, already massive cape, 3,309 joules per kilogram mixed layer cape at 12Z, big kind of fish hook photograph, very strong winds throughout all levels, no real veering at any level, and just insane parameters too. I mean, supercell composite 40.4, which is pretty rare to see that early in the morning. Very low LCLs and very strong winds in the lowest levels. And then just kind of stepping ahead to the afternoon at 18Z before initiation, nice kind of open photograph. Shear actually kind of dropped off because you weren't getting the influence of the previous day's kind of nocturnal low jet into the early morning. But still huge cape profile, insane lapse rates, just a overall dangerous looking environment around OKC, and then just kind of shifting back up north, back to that secondary target. Still decently sheared, pretty high cape still, decent helicity and shear values, 47 knots of deep layer shear. Just a overall good looking day all the way up and down the stationary front. And then finally, we'll kind of just run through some of the upper air charts for that morning. Massive upper low over the Dakotas with the attendant jet streak exit region right around in there. And then by 0Z, even stronger winds coming around the base of that trough as that low starts to eject across the upper Midwest. And then kind of stepping forward, moist axis right through here, all the way back, and moisture extending all the way back up in the Midwest. Pretty strong, sharp dry line over west central Oklahoma, and kind of making almost a triple point in Canadian County. And just, I mean, looking at this day, the moisture present was absolutely insane for this time of year, especially in Oklahoma. I mean, mid-70s dew points, no matter where you are going to be, pretty rare, even with close proximity to the Gulf. I mean, 74 over 70 at, I think that's 12Z, and it was mostly clear, too, across central Oklahoma. It wasn't really cloudy to start the day. Some clouds move in and kind of close to early afternoon, late morning. Then we get to clear out, surface temps rise. Moisture keeps ticking up, too. High 90s on the dry side of the dry line, and, moisture keeps on climbing up, and then by the time of initiation, 23Z, I mean, there's still 72 72 up here, 70s over here. Just so much moisture to pull it. Meaning this and with how sheer the storm was, or how sheer the environment was, I should say, you could kind of pick out. There's going to be that one big supercell that produces a monster somewhere in this general area over here near the Oklahoma City metro. So just kind of step over to one of the mesoscale discussions. I mean, here you can see a surface map with some of the features overlaid and choke points right here. Canadian County and El Reno are right about here, right under that 8. And then stepping forward one more, and then the greatest risk begins to evolve across this area as the dry line gradually shifts east and the quasi-stationary front begins to shift south as a cold front. And I mean, it was just an absolutely insanely looking dangerous day. More had happened though, probably about a week and a half earlier, and people were definitely very skittish about it coming into the metro area. And with how insane the thermodynamic and shear profiles were for that day, it was one of those days that it was easy with how big the storms were to lose track of where everything was and how just absolutely massive the entire storm's updraft was. It was just hard to keep track of everything. So, yeah, that's just kind of the meteorology side of it, at least.
And the way that storm or that complex kind of evolved was, if I remember right, there was about 3 different supercells that went up at the same time, and they all kind of fought each other, which is something I'd like to see while chasing. Is you kind of want to see these, or very early on, you want to see a little bit of a cluster of storms kind of fighting for each other, then one of them will go dominant. That's kind of one of my go-to signs of a good day. You don't want them all to go dominant because then you have kind of issues there, but I guess, Skip, you kind of, you've really done a lot of, I guess, not so much case study, but you've really delved into this day. You have several videos that are out for this day, and, you've really made a lot of good content for anyone that wants to learn about this day. And so kind of explain your thoughts on the day and kind of what happened with your perspective.
Yeah, James did a really good job highlighting the meteorological synopsis of the event. I won't add anything there. I agree. It was a slam dunk. The thing to me about the day was that, to me, it wasn't obvious until the day of. I thought the dry line looked kind of sloppy going into the event, maybe 2 or 3 days out. But the morning of, it was spelled out to a T. Head to El Reno because it's just east of the triple point, and you've got the great roads there. So that's what everybody did. And really, the event was the perfect combination to get a lot of people in trouble. We had the HP storm mode. We had a tornado that was moving in all different directions. It was varying in size, speed, direction of travel. It was just a perfect storm, really. And then to me, it was just basically the most telling thing about how your chase went and what went wrong and where people wound up was kind of their positioning. So where did you first get on the tornado, and then how did you play the tornado? Because if you were north of the tornado initially playing that inflow notch, or if you were to the south or east, that was kind of your fateful moment there that kind of laid out what was going to happen to you later, I think. So yeah, the moral of the story on that event, I think, was that we had a gigantic circulation that people were trying to escape from in a kind of conventional way by heading south into the clear air, and for a lot of people there just wasn't time to do that. And losing the windshield and the hail to the north was the better option that I think a lot of people should have done instead. But yeah, targeting, slam dunk setup, really rare to see that kind of slam dunk target like that. And then just from a chasing standpoint, a really ugly, nasty event. I don't like El Reno. I thought it was a kind of a low contrast, ugly tornado for the most part, and just so dangerous. Just a really ugly, black, dark day in chasing. A lot of mistakes were made and a lot of lessons to be learned there about picking safe escape routes. not crossing tornadoes' paths when taking your escape route, and positioning yourself so that you have time to escape on a gigantic HP tornado.
Sorry, Ben. How about you? How was your perspective of Reno? I think you actually missed it, but that may have been for good reason.
Yeah, we were going north on 81, and Stephen Jones. I asked him if we should go west on 37 there, just south of Union City, as we approached the storm from the southeast, because kind of stuck around in Norman for quite a while, and he said, "Yeah, let's go west and try and get to this other river crossing." And it happened to be a little bit further than we anticipated. The storm kind of surged more to the southeast than we anticipated, and came up over the river. Ran into the RFD a couple miles east of our river crossing, and it was one of those days where I just didn't really want to play with what was on the other side, because I didn't really know, and I knew what kind of environment the day was, so I bailed back. Was hoping that the storm would keep going southeast and that I could put myself in a really good position when everybody else got cut off by the river and I was south of the river, and that didn't happen, obviously, as it curved back off to the northeast. But I ended up not seeing much of anything that day. But at the same time, a navigational error probably saved our lives, or at least we didn't end up in the scary bail out of the way like everybody else did.
Yeah, I actually had to work that day. I had to work. I actually was begging to get off because in the morning of, the setup looked just carbon copy almost of more, and they had the triple point sitting out there. I think the only thing that was missing was some of the extra outflow boundaries, but it was a pretty obvious target that the area around that, just each of that triple point, was going to be the hot spot. It was going to be, if a storm could go up there, it was going to go big, and there was nothing saying that there wasn't going to be a storm there. I mean, you didn't have to worry about strong capping. I think there was some capping, but it was enough to keep early precip down. And insane, like James said, insane instability, and just enough shear to get it done, to get something big done, basically. So I guess it's a good thing I didn't have to chase, because I'm not sure exactly how I would have handled that storm. More than likely, I would have been part of that group trying to fly south of 81 as fast as I can. But what I noticed about that day, and several chasers fell victim to this, was vehicles that there was some vehicles that just didn't have a lot of power, couldn't actually pull themselves through all the inflow winds or the RFD winds, whatever winds they had to go through. Mostly the inflow, I believe, but those chasers were really struggling because their vehicles were underpowered, and the wind was actually holding them back from getting any faster on some of these roads. And that's kind of one of those days where you wish you had a little more horsepower under the hood to push yourself through that. But a lot of chasers did have a pretty miserable time on that chase, as far as I know. There's not very many chasers I know that actually had that could actually call that a successful intercept, because your normal positions that you would normally position yourself in to see this tornado were kind of blocked off, or you were in the danger zone. And yeah, it was pretty bad. But Ben, were you about to say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, John Wetter, who runs Spotter Network now, he posted that for 24 hours starting 10 p.m. tonight, we will pay tribute to Tim, Paul, and Carl. Apparently, we're going to set up a TPC between Regina, Saskatchewan, and Winnipeg, Manitoba. More information, go visit the Spotter Network Facebook page, facebook.com/Spotter Network.
Good to know. I'll probably take part of that. Gene, did you happen to chase that day?
Yeah.
Okay, and go ahead and kind of tell us your account of that day.
Well, I started out a little bit further north than everyone else, and there was a storm, the next storm up the line. There was 3 or 4 storms initially, and they all merged. But before they did, there was a storm to the north uh, that produced a tornado. And I saw either that tornado or a funnel close to the ground as I was coming south. And uh, I got into El Reno, and the whole thing was still forming up. And I looked at it, and I said to myself, I've seen this storm before. And it was May 2nd, 1979. There was a storm just like it. So I treated it like that day. And that day, we had a Time magazine uh, writer, photographer with us. And we took him out. And that day turned out pretty dicey for us. We had a tornado cross just south of us in the inflow, about 100 yards, 150 yards, an F2. And then the main tornado turned northeast, did a 90-degree turn, and came northeast right at us. So I thought, okay, I bet it's going to do it again. So I played it that way. And when the hail fog came out in the very cold air, it pushed the mesocyclone intact instead of undercutting it. It pushed it intact to the southeast. So I backed off to the east, and I watched that hail fog subside, the push on it. And that's at the point where I thought it was going to turn back up. I made the mistake of trying to tell a policeman that. I said, it's going to turn back up toward El Reno. And he dismissed me and said, we don't need your input. You know, we know what this is going to do. It's going the other way. And I thought, okay, I'm wasting my time. So I went on to the east and got up on an overpass. Even though it's flat ground, I needed some visibility. And the overpass I got on was maybe 25 feet above the highway. And it gave me an overview. And I shot from that overview as it came at me. And I think I got pretty good pictures. And I waited until it almost got to I-40, and the horizontal vortices, there were 2 horizontal vortices went across I-40. And it was at that point, and there was roaring, that I thought I ought to get out. And a sub-vortex or satellite tornado that had been to the southwest came around on the leading edge of the RFD as it wrapped around the tornado. So I went from the I-40 bridge to Old 66 highway and went east. And as I did, that subvortices hit and started ripping the roofs off buildings. And as I left that area, the sheet metal was all going airborne. And that was enough for me to get out, because anybody that would have been hit by that spinning, flying sheet metal would have been, you know, they were big sheets, like they put on a industrial building. And so that was my cue to haul ass. And I got out at that point. And actually, I felt pretty good. As I got back on I-40 and headed into Oklahoma City, I was thinking to myself, you pulled it off, you did it, you got the pictures. And then I got just past the airport and saw the infinite taillights and knew I was screwed. And I wound up riding out the second tornado in a bank teller pull through, which was scary. It was a scary time. It was still daylight outside, and Oklahoma City went pitch black. So it wound up being a bad day for me, too. That's sort of my story. The pictures, some of the pictures were published, one in National Geographic. So in that way, I did okay, even though it was tragic for others. But then the Oklahoma City debacle came, and I really wished I was someplace else, sitting there completely trapped, no way to get out, total traffic jam, and a car wreck about every 30 seconds because people were running the lights. They were scared to death, and the electricity had knocked out the light. The electricity was gone, and I sat there and just watched the power flashes come at me from the what they call the Will Rogers Airport tornado, the one
Right.
right across in front, which had gotten photographed fairly well before it came in to that area of Oklahoma City, and had a damage path, maybe F1 or something, for a couple miles along 240, and then it dissipated. And that's kind of my story about what happened to me that day. And I wasn't in the 81 crowd at all.
Yeah, it sounds pretty stressful. Like I said, everyone seemed to have a bad day. Dan Robinson almost fell victim to the tornado. He got really close to it. Of course, Mike Bettis and the Weather Channel got their vehicle tossed. Daniel Shaw had a semi-truck on I-40 basically flip into him as he was stopped on the interstate. It flipped right behind him and it kind of almost landed on top of him. So, man, there's a lot of horror stories out of that day, and it's weird because I think we've all kind of taken the tornadoes for granted. We haven't seen anything like that, but stuff like that isn't completely unheard of, especially what that tornado did, which was, grow in size, kind of anchor itself for a while, grow in size, and then kind of slingshot in another direction and just completely max out. Obviously, we've never seen anything on that scale because that was the largest, tornado on record. But it was just those. I think there was for everyone that was involved in that day. It was probably a lot of emotions kind of running through their bodies the whole time. And I'll never know what it was like because I wasn't there, but I can just imagine just the different emotions you're feeling. You're feeling excitement, adrenaline, panic, and then afterwards, pretty some sadness that came along with it. So, I hope everybody in the future just understands that, yes, a tornado can do that. It can do exactly what a Reno did. It can happen again. The next setup it doesn't matter if the conditions are there, it'll do it. And of course, James, I believe 2.6 was the tornado width, but when you count in the RFD and everything in the influence, the path was much wider, right?
Yeah, I mean, just damage from the storm, like grand total, like just from damage you went from like the RFD behind the tornado, and then inflow into the tornado is probably it's much wider area.
I don't remember exactly what number, but I think it was something like almost 4 miles wide, just when you included the wind damage as well as the tornado damage. So, pretty bad deal if you're not there. Well, it looks like a party that. Oh my God. Oh my God. What the hell's going on, Ben?
Freaking Bart Comstock showed up.
Oh my goodness.
Is this on?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Oh man.
Hello.
Well, thanks for being on, Bart. I don't know if you guys got anything else to add to the May 31st, 2013 day. It was a substantial day in terms of meteorology, but also, of course, a lot of personal lives touched that day. Tim, Carl, and Paul were all, seemed to be friends with everybody that they met. I never had the pleasure of meeting any of them, and it kind of bummed me out because I've always wanted to meet those guys. I've known them through their work and through a lot of videos I've seen, I've known them for quite a while. But other than that, never knew them personally. I know, Skips obviously. You guys met him up. You put a great video um, online a little bit after that. You guys were just shooting the breeze out there with the TIV on 2000 in April 8th, I believe, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was April of that year, and we were just hanging out at McDonald's, and it was Tim and crew who came over to talk to us, and it was always them, and that really touched me. That Tim was always so outgoing that he would reach out and make that connection. The last time we saw him was May 9th of that year down in southern Oklahoma or Texas, somewhere down there. And we were loading up our car, and Tim walked over to say hi to us, check out our setup, and wish us luck for the day. So yeah, that's what really impressed me most about him, was so passionate and yet so outgoing with sharing that passion.
Right. Yeah, he always seemed like a very, very approachable guy. There's a lot of chasers that are out there that are very approachable. Not everyone's kind of, doesn't want to meet new people, but I felt bad about the whole deal, but like I said, I never met him, so I guess it never really hit me as hard. It was a pretty sad moment, and but I just hope everyone, just from that, the one thing to take away from that is just you got it was kind of Mother Nature's giving everyone a reality slap that she still has control over everything. So just make sure you be careful when you're out there. That's why we always say be safe at the end of every show. At the end of every show. So I hope you guys do that from now on. I know we're kind of running a little late here. We'll go ahead and wrap up the show. I know there's some setups coming up. I'm sure you're going to hear about it from everybody else. Tuesday looks like Dakota/Nebraska, and then of course on the weekend, just I think it was same area, Dakotas, Nebraska, in that area, and then June's coming. Hopefully we dry out a little bit. Hopefully the EML source warms up. We get a little bit of EML to overspread and get some capping going on. That's an important aspect of these severe setups is the capping. So, but anyway, I guess we'll go ahead and end the show. We'll have everybody, I guess, say where they could find you on social media or whatever. Skip, how about you tell everybody where they could find you?
Yeah, just I got my website there at the bottom, and it's got my chase logs on it, and there's links to my YouTube stuff. So hopefully put a couple of videos out here of our Texas chases and stuff, and yep, that's it.
All right, James, what about you? Where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Facebook. I'll try to start a Twitter at some point eventually. No commitment there yet. And then thunderingsky@blogspot.com. I'll probably start updating that here soon now that I have some downtime. A bunch of pictures, chase logs, crap like that. So feel free to check it out.
Cool. Ben, how about you? Where can everybody find you?
Everything can be found at okchaser.com, and Bart is causing a ruckus here.
Sounds like a regular party over there, huh? Oh, gosh. Gene, how about you? Where can everybody find you or your work?
Well, I'm just on Facebook, usually check it every day. So I'm not hard to come up with.
Cool.
Pretty easy.
All right. And, of course, man, I messed up my thing on there the whole time. I didn't even notice my, my website. I'm not the WXChaser.com. I am the TXWXChaser.com. That's my website. There we go. That looks right now. So there you can see, you could find all my pictures and stuff there. You could look up my name. You'll find YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. You can find me there. Of course, if you want to tweet the show or like us on Facebook, the show is at TGT_show on Twitter. And of course, on Facebook, we're there too. Just look us up. And of course, feedback's always welcome. It's really cool. Lately, I just got back on Facebook, and I've had a lot of random people that I didn't even think would watch the show actually tell me they love the show, which is really cool. So, the whole reason we do the show is because we got people watching, and they seem to enjoy this, so we'll keep doing it. But I'm thankful for all of our guests. Skip, we're really glad you could join us again. We've all kind of missed you. You've had a long absence, but it was all for good cause, I suppose.
Thanks for having me back.
No problem. Gene, we're glad that you did join us. We've had a lot of people actually see if we can get you on the show, and I'm glad, and hopefully they're happy. But of course, I'm always happy to have you on. A lot of knowledge you have there that I would love to pick at some point. And Ben, try to keep your crowd a little under control over there, because I think I could smell that here in Amarillo.
Yeah, it's pretty bad over here. Bart's having a good time.
Sounds like it. And James, I'm glad you were able to be on without any technical issues.
I think this is the first time in like probably 2 months that nothing's gone wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, no joke. That's really true. You've always had some sort of issue. So,
Yep.
I want to thank everybody for watching tonight. We'll try to be on next week if we're not all chasing. That seems to be kind of the theme this last few weeks is we're all just busy out chasing or driving home and whatnot and just can't get coordinated. But luckily the down weekend really helped us out. So thank you all for watching. Hope you have a good night. And, of course, stay safe.